Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today we're talking some Mankato football, a little bit of recaps from the Vikings training camp, what Drew and I were able to witness firsthand down in Mankato. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff to talk about, so this will sort of bleed over into our next podcast. And well, you can kind of consider this to be the kind of a full recap from our vantage point, what we were able to see. But then, obviously, we will be talking a little bit about the practices that will be performed on Monday and Tuesday as well for the Tuesday show that will obviously be live at about 8 p.m. tentatively and post on Wednesday as well. So let's get started right away here. I'm going to do a little kind of rendition of a sponsor note here. Obviously, for the record, thank you for anyone that showed up down at the beer pong tournament at Blackstack Brewing. That was on the 5th. Drew and I obviously were not able to make it because we were down in Mankato, but we got word from both the owner and our producer Cameron that it was a great experience for everyone down there, and they were actually very excited about the people that made it down to Blackstack, and the turnout was great. So thanks for anyone that did make it out there. If you weren't able to make it out there, make sure to check out Blackstack Brewing. Blackstack Brewing is a brand new brewery smack dab in the middle of Minneapolis and St. Paul with a wide range of clean and flavorful brews and a massive bright tap room, perfect for intimate settings, all the way to special events. Blackstack Brewing, that is 755 North Pryor, just north of Menards. Well, you can't really get your tickets for the tournament anymore because the tournament already happened. So make sure to check out www.twincities.directory.com for all the other amazing stuff that they produce, and allow them to help you discover the real Twin Cities. All right, Drew, let's talk about, first and foremost, big thanks to Mankato, man. I had one hell of an experience down there. I've been doing this now for 4 years, 3 years as a credentialed media member. And this was far and away the best experience I've personally had. Everything from just being down there with the dudes. I want to give a shout out to just the guys that do content, that produce quote # content.
Yep.
Everyone down there, man. You've got a great group of writers, bloggers, sports talkers, whatever you want to call them. All these dudes, they've really made it a fantastic experience for me, and I'm sure you kind of can echo my sentiment on that one, Drew.
Yeah. You can tell, for one thing, they work really hard at what they do, and from firsthand experience, we can tell you that this does not pay a whole lot. So these guys are they're working their butts off, not for a whole lot of money here, and this was it was an opportunity for all of us to get together, kind of almost celebrate that in a way,
Sure. Being poured
to
together.
work hard. It's something we really like to do, but we don't get paid a lot for it. So. We did get to celebrate a little bit out with Ribfest and stuff like that, so that was good. But Mankato's great. There's the crowd, the turnout, the energy, the atmosphere, especially that night practice. It was unbelievable. It was really cool to be at.
The energy at the night practice. I tweeted it out. I almost teared up, man. Like, and Drew gave me a little bit of heat on Twitter for that, because for not being a Big J journalist. But you know what? Sometimes there are these moments where like you can't be a journalist anymore because you have feelings. I'm human too, and I'm a Vikings fan too. As much as I can be a dick about my favorite team, I try to be objective. Subjectively speaking, when I'm sitting out there and the fans are going wild, they got the hype video rolling with all of my favorite moments from last season, stuff that I've broken down on this show, stuff that I've just had a pleasure watching in the past. Man, it's tough not to get emotional. So I hope everyone that was down in Mankato really enjoyed that final Mankato experience, because it really was, man. They did it big. They knew how to blow it out and do a good job. And I'm really excited to transition to Eagan next year as well. As much as I'm going to miss Mankato, doing that 90-minute drive from St. Paul out there. What was it? 3 times that we did it. Not
too many.
Yeah, too many. I'm excited to do the 15-minuter out to Eagan next year. So, going off of the overall experience, the players, it seemed like we're having a pretty good experience as well. It seems like this team is a lot better than I think some people give them credit for. I think that we tend to take a little bit of a cynical look at the Vikings just always. It's inherent to our fan base. I mean, why wouldn't you after all the things that we've been through kind of as a fan base? But this could really be a special season. I want to start with the wide receiver group because I think that's the group that I probably spent the most time watching, and that's partially because it's a very interesting group to watch when you've got guys like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen at the top really rowing the boat for the team, and then you've got guys like Michael Floyd who are coming in and really starting to show out, and of course you got the young rookies like Stacey Coley and Rodney Adams who both really fun to talk to, nice guys. If you haven't checked out Rodney Adams' video blogs, make sure to check those out on YouTube. He's a really he's a special guy with some real character, even if he isn't on the 53-man roster this year. So that was an exciting group to talk about. And then, of course, Caleb Jones, man. I really liked that guy. I thought he was a really cool dude, and he flashed some real potential for me. So, Drew, outside of Stephon Diggs, who I think that we should spend some, a nice chunk of this
unique
show,
portion,
talking about who really stood out for you over the course of the time that we were down at Mankato there.
I'm going to give some love to two guys here. First of all, I'm going to give love to Pyology in Mankato because that was delicious. And
You're killing our chance at getting Little Caesars as our sponsor right now.
Yeah, it's worth it. Because Matt Khalil deserves props for that place.
He really does. He really
say what you want about his performance on the field and whatnot. That guy knows how to put together a pizza place. So props to Pyology, props to Matt Khalil. But anyway, the wide receiver position. Jarius Wright stepped in kind of as the third receiver with Treadwell out, and with Michael Floyd not. I think they're kind of keeping him on the second team for the most part here because of that suspension. So Wright went in there as a slot guy, and kind of Diggs moved back out to the outside with Thielen. And Wright was really exceptional in the slot there, and made it tough for Mackenzie Alexander. So I liked that, and I also like Stacey Coley. This guy, he's fluid. He's I'm going to stick with my Stephon Diggs comparison. Obviously, Diggs is just special and kind of just unique, and the fact
he's
that
special
his
in
routes
so many
are
ways.
so crisp.
Yeah,
his crisp routes, it's really uncomparable. But Coley's got the same movements, the same tendencies, and it kind of has that same kind of gliding motion when he's running across the field. So
his demeanor is fairly similar, like the quiet confidence to him, right?
Yeah, they're almost identical in size. There's a lot of similarities there that I like. So I think Coley and Jarius Wright were the two guys for me that really stuck out.
Here, let's talk a little bit more about Stacey Coley real quick. Strictly because, first of all, I got a chance to talk to Stacey Coley. The first thing that I want to note about him is that when he came out as a 7th-round pick, obviously, out of Miami, the biggest knock on him, like the number one big thing, obviously there is the size concerns, but those are sort of overblown always. Size is sort of relative. I mean, you see Blake Bortles, who has the perfect size for the quarterback position, and he's not a great quarterback, obviously. Then you see guys like Taylor Heineke, who's obviously the GOAT at the quarterback position, and he stands at about 5'11". So Stacey Coley, the biggest problem for him coming out, according to Mike Mayock, all the big-time draft analysts that had the opportunity to do a kind of a psychological evaluation of him and talk to guys that had done psychological evaluations of him, was his passion for football. How invested was he in turning his kind of college scholarship that got him his free education into an actual career in the sport, which is a grueling experience. We were complaining about the heat out there. Imagine being in full pads. It's not easy to be a football player. I think sometimes as armchair GMs we try to make it act like, all you have to do is work out and then you'll be fine. Well, it's not always easy to wake up at 6 in the morning for walkthroughs, by the way, where you're standing in sweaters and, your jersey. It's not always easy to do that, but some guys, make it look easier than others because they're sort of invested in it. J.J. Watt, for example, sort of has turned, you know how J.J. Watt is. I don't need to talk to you about J.J. Watt. Yeah. But Stacey Coley, I really don't think – I think the passion thing is overblown with him. When I got a chance to talk to him, man, he's got that calm demeanor, which might – kind of signal that he's not fully invested or that he's not very passionate about the game. But when you talk,
I can see what you mean.
When you talk to him and actually kind of break down some football with him, first of all, a very smart, intelligent guy. Knows exactly what his strengths and weaknesses are. but he also has that kind of that subtle confidence, which is what I just made that comparison to Diggs, where Diggs, when he was a rookie 2 years ago, quiet in camp, just kind of went about his business, and Stacey Coley has really been very similar in that regard. I thought that he did a tremendous job at camp as well, and like I said, I really think that passion thing is kind of overblown. And part of the reason why I think that is, I made the mistake of saying some people call some people refer to you as a small receiver. I didn't use the word undersized, which is what I should have said, but not a Big J journalist yet, so I made that mistake. And Coley kind of responded with, first of all, big smile on his face. Loved the fact that he loves the criticism of his his physical frame, where he smiled and was like, "Small? I'm like 6 feet tall, man." And I'm standing here at 6'3", kind of looking down, and I'm like, "Yeah, like a little bit small." And then I kind of backed up because I got afraid, like a normal human. I was like, "Whoa, like relative to your position, buddy." But he was very passionate. A lot of fun to talk to, and I really believe in his. I really believe in kind of his story and his ascension into being an NFL player here. Like Drew said, very impressive performance. His route running on point. He ran a lot of his routes directly after Moritz Boringer during the kind of the drills, the early drills in practice before the simulations went on, and it was night and day. So very, very impressive Stacey Coley all around.
Yeah, and then I think we should mention his what he's doing in the return game. He's returning kicks and punts. It looks like to me that he's quite clearly the number 2 punt returner behind Marcus Sherrills right now. Rodney Adams is back there, and he looked more unnatural than probably I would have back there as a punt returner. Kick returning is a different story. Rodney Adams he's ready as a kick returner, but I think Coley's for sure. That's definitely going to help his chances on the roster spot. If you can be the kind of reliable, serviceable guy behind Sherrills in the event of an injury, you're going to most likely be there. So I liked Coley, and I was a big Coley fan right out of the draft. So
sure.
Obviously he showed up. I would say your guy Caleb Jones has also made some splash plays, a few drops, but I think he's got a really good potential too, and I think strong candidate for the practice squad.
Yeah, I'm gonna give some credit to Andy Carlson here, because I know he's been the one harping on it specifically, and kind of bringing up a really good point here, that when you see a guy that's working with a lot of the first team on special teams, or first and second team getting a lot of reps, guys like Isaac Frichte, for example, who was getting a lot of reps as a punt returner and kind of a kick returner, to our surprise. I know there was a couple times where you and I looked at each other like, what's Frichte doing out there? Doesn't really have that the skill set or the athleticism.
He's in the slot a lot too, with like the second and third team, which is weird.
Right. So anytime you see a guy that's working out and becoming sort of establishing himself as as maybe a backup or just an important cog in everything else that goes into the game of football. We love to talk about the offensive and defensive phases, but if there isn't a depth chart that really gets put out for the special team spots, the gunner spot, the guys that are setting the blocks early in the return and that kind of stuff. But that stuff is important. And Stacey Coley, Isaac Frichte were a couple guys that were on seemingly every special teams unit. And that really gives them a great shot to make the 53-man roster. Obviously, we did a 53-man roster prediction show with Andy on the Purple for the Win show. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure to check it out. Drew said on Twitter earlier today, I personally, and I agree with you on this, Drew, I personally think that the special teams section of the show is the best. And the whole thing is absolutely fantastic. I do think it's a little bit early to be talking 53-man roster here, given that we got an entire preseason and still actually two practices up in Mankato. But at the same time, we're starting to get a bit of a look as to how this thing may shape out. And going back to Caleb Jones, this is a guy that's on the bubble right now. I think that he knows that. When I talked to him, I had the pleasure of kind of doing a tag team interview with Matthew Collar from 1500, and we talked to him, and it was a fun conversation because we didn't stick to football, and I know you guys love it when we stick to football and don't talk about anything else. But Matthew Collar brought up kind of allowed him to open the floodgates a little bit and really feel comfortable speaking with us, and that led to a conversation about video games, which I love. If you're watching the video edition right now, as you can see, I've got about 75 video games.
Way too many Nintendo 64 games. Like, it's way too many.
So I am a big Nintendo 64 fan, and that makes me a big fan of Caleb Jones, who, for the record, big fan of Madden, GoldenEye, and then he also said that he liked playing Super Mario as well. So he's both an RPG guy as well as a sports guy. That should tell you a little bit about a little bit more behind-the-scenes stuff about a guy that could really become a factor. Maybe not in Minnesota, just because I think that if the Vikings do elect to release him, he's going to end up somewhere because he really has shown, quite a bit of ability over the last 4 days that we've been there, and then over the course of camp, from word of mouth, I've heard that he's been fantastic all of camp here.
Yeah, he's a pretty big dude. What's he at?
About 6'2".
6'2"?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty tall for a receiver.
He plays to his size too, which is nice.
Yeah, I think he plays even. He's got kind of a longer, lanky frame, but I think he plays a lot quicker than he looks to, which that also. I think that helps him quite a bit. And I think we are in agreement as well on Fricky as a receiver that it seems like he was just rigid as a route runner a little bit. He was it didn't seem as natural as it did to Coley, to Jones, to all the obviously Diggs and Thielen and Wright. So the fact that he's getting all this attention as a possible roster spot, getting the first looks on special teams, maybe they're giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, given that he's been in camp for 3 years now, I believe.
Yeah, and we have talked about how this is sort of his last stand, right?
Yeah, this is his last go here.
The Vikings are aware of this too, that they can't throw him on stash him on the practice squad anymore. So they're trying to get that final, is this guy an NFL player or is he not? So it's good to see him getting all these looks.
Yeah, and they're moving him around too, like we said before. He's in the slot and stuff, so. The receiver position is very interesting because I think as a whole, it's probably right around average, maybe a little bit above average in the NFL.
In terms of,
I think I mean, looking at the bottom of the depth chart, I think there's a lot of talent there.
Sure.
That could wind up on other teams, or at least we'll get a lot of interest because R.J. Shelton too.
Oh my God!
Straightaway speed. The straightaway speed
how
isn't
much
there,
did he blow you away? Honestly, R.J. Shelton going into camp.
Yeah.
We talked about him, in our camp preview show as kind of a guy, right?
We didn't really talk about him.
Yeah, we basically said
R.J. Shelton is also a person.
Yeah.
Basically, is what we said.
About a form of matter, as you like to say, right? Joe?
Yeah, a form of matter.
He really, really impressed me, guys. I love me some R.J. Shelton now. Obviously not the biggest dude in the world. I tower over him, which was kind of it's really a fun experience when you're at camp and you make a football player look small. I had that experience a couple times.
Good for you.
Both with Terrell Newby, who is very small, Jet McKinnon as well. But just looking at some of these guys, R.J. Shelton, man, I think it was Eli that pointed out to us that part of the reason why he went undrafted is because he ran that 4.7, which you worry about that 40 time as a wide receiver because straight line speed is, it is important to some degree as a wide receiver because that 9 route, that streak, that is straight up just basically running 40 yards. And if you can run 40 yards faster than some people, I mean, we saw Randy Moss do it for years. You don't necessarily need to be the greatest route runner in the world.
Right.
If you're not facing press coverage, you could just get past a guy. Throw the hand up and something can happen. But I think R.J. Shelton plays a lot faster than that combine time.
Well, that's why him as a slot option in a few years could be really something special, just because he's got that lateral quickness and that kind of quick twitch that you need to have in that slot. Whether you got cornerback or receiver, you got to have that quick twitch kind of trait. So he's definitely got that. You did see him get some looks as a returner, but. I mean, you'd figure that straightaway speed kind of makes it harder for him to get a spot. But he's precise routes, quick out of the cuts. He could definitely be a solid player sometime soon. It might not be with the Vikings right now just because of how loaded the depth chart is there. But eventually I think he'll find a job and he'll make an NFL career out of it. I'm
gonna quick comp him a little bit to Adam Thielen. And you're going to have to bear with me a little bit as I make this comparison because obviously their athleticism profiles are not the same. But Adam Thielen is a guy, and every one of you guys knows Adam Thielen's stories, right? Kid from Detroit Lakes that basically entered the NFL through an extra combine camp that was held in the Boondocks, and ends up on the Vikings roster, becoming a big play guy, essentially a number one type receiver, at least for the latter half of last year. R.J. Shelton, I think, has a similar road. Right, that's how I'm making this comparison. If he continues to work hard, continues to work on his fundamentals, which I personally think are his strengths right now, those crisp cuts over the middles, both on the comebacks and on those slant routes. I think that if he continues to work at that stuff, he's going to eventually find a job in the NFL, eventually get that 3-year pension to kind of establish himself as a former NFL player. If that's the extent of his career, I don't know. But I'm going to make the comp to Adam Thielen being that if he continues to work hard and continues to refine his game, he has enough athletic ability to be a guy in the NFL. And that's something I learned from camp this year. Big takeaway for me is that R.J. Shelton has enough athleticism to be valuable to some team at some point in his career if he continues to work hard and continues to refine his skills, just as Adam Thielen did before him.
So right now, is he on your practice squad?
Yes, absolutely. I would absolutely put him on my practice squad, and part of that is because I don't think rostering Moritz on the practice squad I don't think it's worth it anymore. I'm not saying the Vikings will allow Moritz to walk, or he's still got one more year left of eligibility on the P squad, but I just don't think it's worth it anymore. I think R.J. Shelton has more future value, despite the disparity in what would be a pretty ridiculous comparison of athleticism charts between Moritz and R.J. Shelton. But Shelton is just so much more refined. He's so much more technically ready, and just I think he's just so much more capable. So I think that for me, I think right now Caleb Jones is probably the biggest beneficiary of the Michael Floyd suspension, because you could make a strong case for him making the 53 behind guys like Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Jarius Wright, who, by the way, is just about he's locked it in. He's as good as a receiver as anyone.
I should never have doubted his roster spot.
He's shutting a lot of us up over the course of camp here. That's another big takeaway for me, is how impressive he has been, and also on top of that, his ability to sort of fight through the criticism and doing the things that he was able to do down at camp. So for me, the guys that you look for from the wide receiver depth chart in terms of being a practice squad guy that you could develop: R.J. Shelton, Caleb Jones if he doesn't make the 53, and then I think that about Isaac Fricky obviously doesn't have the practice squad eligibility anymore, but I think that's about it. But I really like both Caleb Jones and R.J. Shelton to be guys you put on the practice squad if they in fact do not make the 53.
Yeah, I agree with you on both of those guys. It's just losing Treadwell, I think, kind of with Jarius Wright here. I think losing Treadwell, I think you're getting some good things out of this. The fact that Diggs can be just as effective in the slot and outside is kind of the big deal here, because I think that's why they had Treadwell in there. I think kind of as that third receiver, because they can move Diggs inside, and he's obviously excellent out of the slot.
Sure.
So you minimize Jarius Wright's role, and then you can have two solid outside guys in Treadwell and Thielen, and then have Diggs in the slot. I think that's part of the reason also, you talk about last year, and even the year before as well, Diggs in the slot. And then you have, where does Jarius Wright go? He's not going to play outside. He's going to be in the slot. So that's, if guys are hurt, Jarius Wright can slide right into that slot role. I think that's exactly what his role will be this season. If there's three guys, Treadwell, maybe it's Floyd, Thielen, Diggs. There's three guys there that can play. I don't think Wright will play a lot, but if he's available, he will get in that slot role, and he will produce, because that's just what he does.
Sometimes the best ability is availability, and Jarius Wright, for what it's worth, has always been available to the Vikings. From the moment that he stepped on the field as a 4th-round pick from Arkansas. I think a lot of times we forget that he was a 4th-round pick, and that he's been able to make a career out of this.
He's worth it.
He got a second contract. I mean, maybe he hasn't been on the field much lately, but he has always been available to the Vikings. So good for Jarius Wright. Best of luck to him. Honestly, I'm rooting for him now. I love the shut up the haters kind of mentality that he's got rolling.
He literally talked to the media. He called these people idiots. He called me an idiot, essentially. So
that's fine. Hey, dude, I like that. First of all, it's fun because you could probably attest to this as well that a lot of guys don't give you very fun quotes to work with. That's why it was so refreshing to talk to guys like Caleb Jones and Stacey Coley.
That's why you start out with something funny,
right.
Or weird. Like you ask them if they're boneless or bone in, or you do something along those lines to kind of get them loose, and then they like to talk. That's
a good kind of recommendation, I guess, for some people that are hoping to get into being someone that's being a media member down at I could still be at Egan, but at Vikings training camp. When you talk to guys, if you open it up with the fun question, the interview is going to go way better. I mean, Luke Inman talked to Terrell Sinkfield.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
That
was absurd.
For about 20 minutes because he got him to continue talking, and Sinkfield was engaged too. So it really works. That kind of thing really does work, and it gets you some better quotes, better talking points for us here on the show. So let's talk about Stefon Diggs now. Like I said, I wanted to reserve a little piece of the wide receiver discussion for this dude. First and foremost, this guy is the ultimate fan favorite, and why he was not in our conversation about being the face of the franchise, I don't know. He should have been. Let's put it that way, because
you got to be healthy first for a full season.
This is true, but in term, if we were to rank the crowd noise as players walked out, Teddy was definitely number one for sure. I don't think that'll surprise anybody. I kind of shook my
head.
Yeah, I kind of shook my head and looked over at Drew like, what? I mean, I get cheering for the guy. Yeah,
guy's not playing this year.
Yeah, exactly. But Stefon Diggs was probably a very solid number 2 or 3 coming out of the tunnel.
I would say easy 2.
You think easy 2? Yeah.
Although I will say that when they went through, at the very end of the practice, they went through each player and announced him to the crowd. Mm-hmm. All 90 of them, and Sam Bradford was last because they did quarterbacks last. First of all, I'm a little bit surprised that they did. Teddy second to last and Bradford last.
Good for the Vikings on that one. Good on that.
I do respect that. But then Bradford's applause was very loud.
Yeah.
That one was comparable to a Teddy one for sure. But I think overall, entering the practice and then during the practices, I think Stefon Diggs, as far as guys on the field outside of quarterbacks, easily the loudest. I think.
Yeah, and on top of that, other guys that were. Other guys on top of Stefon Diggs that got some big roars from the crowd. Xavier Rhodes, obviously. Yep. He also got a hell of a lot of kind of critical a lot of morons were yelling critical takes at Xavier Rhodes. Like, literally any time he messed up. That was kind of the weirdest part of practice for me, was just seeing, like, come on, Zay, like, you just made $70 million. What are you doing?
Here's the thing. If you're going to go to training camp, you're like Stefon Diggs just beat Xavier Rhodes for a touch. Like, there was a long touchdown play. I don't know how long it was, 50-something yards.
Yep.
And if your first inclination or first thing that pops in your head is to then criticize Xavier Rhodes instead of praise Stefon Diggs and Sam Bradford for the long connection, like, why are you even there? Why? That's no fun at all. Like, you're the worst person here. You are no fun at parties.
Let's talk a little bit about that point right there. Because I think a lot of fans kind of, when they watch training camp, and you and I just talked about this off the air, that when you're watching training camp, when, for example, a guy like Trey Waynes gets beaten by, say, Michael Floyd or whoever it was that had been beating up Trey Waynes a little bit, that doesn't necessarily mean that Trey Waynes was off. It just meant that he got beaten. And that's going to happen.
This is perfect. This is a perfect discussion for the offensive line. And kind of because you have Rashad Hill, who, by the way, is doing very well, and I think the injury he had during camp, it was scary, but I think it's mostly minor. I think his agency said
that. He should be fine.
Right, but I mean, whether it's Jeremiah Searles, a left tackle, or whether it's Mike Remmers or whoever it is, when they get beat by guys like Everson Griffin, Daniil Hunter, or even at guard like Nick Easton, Pat Elflein, whoever it is, when they're getting beat by like Linval Joseph and Everson Griffin and Daniil Hunter.
These are the guys that just got paid.
Obviously, that it's not good to see your guy get beat, but we have to keep in mind that they're going against superstar level players in this league that very few teams have, that caliber player. So
especially lined up next to each other too, right? Because it does influence Everson Griffin's game. That two spots down on the line, he's got $50 million man Linval Joseph, eating inside too. So this is a really important point and a really big thing for now that we are starting to talk takeaways from camp. It's really important to note that. Not getting beat doesn't necessarily mean you're not getting better or that you're not going to be good. It just means that you got beat, and it's a learning experience. It's good. When guys get beat, their first inclination is, all right, let's figure out what happened there so that it never happens again. If it happens at training camp, you're not hurting anybody, right? There's no scoreboard. There's no time limit. But when it happens, you want them to refine those tools so it doesn't happen during the game. And that's something with guys like Trey Waynes where he got beat quite a bit at camp, but you also saw him
made some splash plays too in that night scrimmage. Yeah.
One heck of a play after getting beaten by Diggs down the sideline. He absolutely made a hell of a play on, I think it was Michael Floyd actually, that he went up and made a pretty good pass defense on a play that really he had no business making a play on.
Yeah. And this whole conversation about Jarius Wright having a really good camp. Yeah. On the flip side of that, Mackenzie Alexander is getting beat a lot. That's just the way it is in the slot. So, obviously there's a couple ways to look at it. You can be that fan that nobody likes, because that'd be that fan you were talking about would be the same thing as looking at Mackenzie Alexander and telling him he sucks because Jarius Wright's beating him on a 15-yard crosser or whatever. So that's no fun. Don't do that if you're actually going to attend it. But going back to Diggs here, we do have something that was asked to us on Twitter by @mkraus28. He asked if Stephon Diggs can jump into the top 5 receiver conversation this year. What do you think about that?
That's okay, a little bit high. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to last year. I had an argument with our good buddy Purple Post at @purple_post on the Twitter machine. We talked about his argument was that Diggs wasn't a top 15 receiver. My argument was that he's arguably a top 15 receiver. I think that for what it's worth on him, I don't think that he wasn't being no chance. It was a constructive argument where we sort of broke down the guys that are right in the conversation. Guys like Jarvis Landry, for example, where we discussed how Diggs has more.
He's a very bipolar player in NFL Twitter. It seems like he's polarizing. It's either you love the guy or you hate the guy.
Right, exactly. And because he can't play on the outside, I gave Diggs the nod over Landry, for example. So getting back to this question from Mr. Kraus, I don't think he has a chance to make top 5 because I have a difficult time ranking 5 receivers right now because there are about 8 in this league, I think.
Yeah.
That are
there's the top 3 for sure, and you get Julio, Brown,
Antonio,
Odell,
and then you
have Mike Evans is in that conversation too. But then you have Des Bryant, AJ Green, and DeAndre Hopkins, and all these other guys that they're at a different level.
Right.
They're just up
part
there.
Of that being on a different level means that you got to do it 4, 5, 6 years in a row. And when you start getting to that level, then we can start talking about top 5 receiver, because I think it was Nate Burleson who was talking about on NFL Network talking about Calvin Johnson's candidacy for the Hall, saying that if you're really good, top shelf of your position for about 3 years, you're Hall of Fame material. So you need to have at least 3 good years, great years, really, to really start getting into that conversation. So for me, Stephon Diggs is a couple years away. I'm not going to put it past him to ever becoming that type of player. We've made the comp to Antonio Brown how many times on this show, in articles, all that kind of stuff. I think that he could certainly become that player. I think he has that ceiling, which is awesome, by the way, considering that he was a 5th-round pick, and I think a lot of people really counted him out right from the start. I wasn't one of them, for what it's worth. But it's fun to see his ascension in the NFL. But I think top 5 is a little too high right now. I would say top 10 is probably the ceiling after this year. But I would still say that sticking him in that 10 to 15 range is really what makes the most sense right now for this point in his career. And we got to talk about that health too. He's got to play 16 games.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
16 games.
If he plays 16 games, he's going to put up borderline top 10 numbers.
Yes.
And and then if you're in a PPR fantasy football league in the full 16 game season, Diggs is going to be a top 10 fantasy receiver. You know, just because, I mean, last year, how many catches do you have per game? Like 7.5 or 8 or something like that. Like his catch per game number is pretty high.
We don't do a whole lot of fantasy football on this show because obviously we're too busy breaking down actual football. But in terms of fantasy football, Drew, if you're trying to get Stephon Diggs in a Minnesota-based draft, right? So you're doing your draft with like 11 other Vikings fans, for example.
Yeah.
What round do you need to take Stephon Diggs right now in order to make sure that he's on your team?
I'm trying to think here because he's probably probably 15th receiver.
Yeah.
In fantasy, I mean PPR, he jumps up quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm a PPR guy for what it's worth, so
that's most of my leagues are PPR. We thinking 7th round, 8th round.
I would say that the highest you should shoot to get him, probably the 5th at the max. I think you're kind of a little bit out of your mind.
In the 5th round, you're going to get some weird looks.
But, but you will get your guy.
Yeah.
I would say that he probably slots in right around that 5th, 6th, 7th round conversation. I would lean more to the 7th or 8th round. But if you're trying to get your guy, Luke Spinman's go get your guy.
Yeah, Luke Inman. Yeah.
Go get your guy in about the 5th or 6th round if you're in a Minnesota draft because I think he'll produce to that level too because, man, how impressive is that guy on the field, whether it's route running, whether it's his ability to just, really energize the fans. Like I said, when he comes on the field, everyone gets amped up. He's taken on that leadership role. He's running with it in stride. I think he used the hashtag, I went from being counted out to being counted on, which I love the swag from Stephon Diggs. That's one asset that he has that's really unparalleled in my opinion. Nobody can get on his level when it comes to the combination of confidence and like actual production. So you love to see that type of thing from Stephon Diggs, and really that's the shift. That's the biggest shift that I've seen from his rookie year is just the overall demeanor, man. He's out there and he's telling guys what to do. He's helping guys. He's amping guys up during during
also
warm-ups.
the playful trash talk between Diggs and Rhodes throughout camp is the most entertaining thing I've ever seen. It was so awesome because I think actually during the night scrimmage when Diggs drilled Rhodes on that long touchdown, they jawed at each other, whatever, and then at the end they both had helmets off, or laughing, and they gave each other dap, and the crowd just loved that. So I think. Yeah.
The thing about getting paid is that you can start laughing at your mistakes a little bit, especially when they're like minor mistakes, like at training camp. If you get beaten by Diggs, I mean, honestly, that's a good thing. Seeing Xavier Rhodes beaten by Vikings receivers, that means a lot more.
Rhodes open.
Well, that means a lot more for the Vikings offense than it actually means about Xavier Rhodes, because we saw what happens over the course of 60 minutes. I mean, he shuts dudes down. I don't think there's any reason to worry about that. He was one of the more impressive overall players at camp, if you're asking me. But to see our guys like Diggs and Thielen as well, I think that, the all-time Mankato great there hasn't gotten enough love because of the guys around him. Thielen was excellent as well, but just the fact that the Vikings receivers are really taking that next step into that being that true number one territory, I think you can make the argument for sure for Diggs, probably for Thielen, and Michael Floyd flashed some number one ability as well. It's great to see, and honestly, I think it bodes well for this team moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny how this episode has turned into pretty much a wide receiver episode, but I think I'm trying to count how many training camps now in a row is it for Adam Thielen at Minnesota State University campus. Because he has said it's now 5 as a Viking.
So that would be about 9, right? That'd be about 9 then?
So it probably 9, unless did he redshirt ever or
no?
Otherwise,
can you redshirt as a Division II player?
I'm pretty sure you can.
I honestly don't know.
I don't know. We'll assume 9. But that's a lot. I mean, I guess I never even thought. I wonder if I'm hoping somebody asked him about that.
They've got
9 training camps in a row.
Yeah. They've got his jersey hanging up at Johnny B's down there in Mankato.
That's right.
So, he is definitely the Mr. Mankato. He is like the all-time Mr. Mankato, right?
Yeah.
Not only did he really earn that title during the year in which he was like involved in the competition, but like he has become the face of Vikings football in Mankato over the last half decade or so here. So great on Adam Thielen. Let's talk something other than wide receivers. Like you said, this is not just a wide receiver show. We're trying to talk about a little bit of everything here, but obviously we can kind of get hooked up on that conversation. Let's talk a little bit about the quarterbacks. First of all, Sam Bradford, lights out. Maybe the best overall performer at camp, whether it was throwing through the wind, throwing darts downfield.
That was impressive.
That was
Thursday.
during, Friday's practice, I believe?
That was Thursday. Thursday when it was like 40 degrees and you were wearing flip-flops out there.
It was, whether it was that or simply his, he was throwing on point to both that pass to Jarius Wright, which I'm sure everyone's seen the video clip of, very great, above average coverage from Anthony Barr, who, by the way, another guy, blanketed him. Another guy that has the opportunity to really step up in a big way this year. Anthony Barr looked really good during camp. But also that throw to Stephon Diggs, the big highlight reel throw that we've referenced a couple times in this show. Sam Bradford is accurate as hell. I don't care if he's throwing 5 yards short of the sticks or if he's throwing 50 yards downfield. This dude puts the ball where he wants it all the frickin' time, and it's unbelievable. He deserves more praise than he's getting. It was a tremendous first training camp in Mankato, and probably I guess also the only one that he's ever going to have in Mankato. He absolutely showed out the entire time I was there.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where you watch some of these throws he makes, and you watch it and you're like, did that just happen? Like, and then so you're like, okay, whatever, that was probably a fluke. There's no way he can do that again. But then he does it 2 plays later, or he does it in his very next rep, and it's jaw dropping. And I don't know if I can stress how accurate this guy is when he throws the football. Now, sure, there are other obviously weaknesses in his game. I mentioned this on Twitter that I thought he checked down a little bit more than he needed to, especially given that it's a training camp and that that's kind of your time to let loose and shoot and take shots down the field.
Yeah.
But from an accuracy standpoint, there are not many quarterbacks in this league. There's probably less than a handful of quarterbacks in this league from a pure accuracy pocket passing standpoint that are better than Sam Bradford. It's unbelievable how accurate this guy is.
It really is. And honestly, he, the title of being, quote, the most accurate quarterback of all time now, given that he does hold the single-season accuracy record and probably making a good jump on the list of career accuracy percentage. I don't know where he falls on the list. I'm just kind of spitballing the idea that I assume he's very high. It's an appropriate title. Let's put it that way. He really is accurate. Whether he's throwing that 12-yard out, which I personally believe is the hardest route to throw in the NFL, or that the long crosser that he hit, that he kind of dropped into the outstretched arms of Jarius Wright with Anthony Barr covering him.
There was no room for error on that throw, by the way.
Right.
None.
That's what I was just going to say, is that's not an easy throw to make, and he made it look easy to the point where people are criticizing him when he's not making throws of that level of difficulty, and he does it so effortlessly. Honestly, that's probably the best word to use, is that he looks effortless out there, whether it's just kind of his weird facial expressions that we kind of make fun of him for, or just the
fact that he's not a super fast person in general,
and
but
looks hilarious whenever he runs. We give Sam Bradford a whole lot of crap because he's kind of he's a fun guy to make fun of. He's a fun guy to make memes about, with the whole what's the face they always look like his eyes are just out of this world.
It's good radio. Good radio.
But he is one hell of a pocket passer, and I really expect a big jump from him this year. Let's move on to the Case Keenum-Taylor Heineke battle. Let's talk about that a little bit here, because that was, quote, the real quarterback battle, the battle that we sort of premised as being the more important battle that's going on here in Minnesota, at least for 2017. We might get the opportunity to see Bradford versus Bridgewater next year, but right now the important quarterback competition is Heineke versus Keenum. Who do you think looked better overall during our time there? And we can talk about our overall performance after that.
Well, to be frank, I don't think neither one was very impressive.
Right.
I remember Thursday set the tone. It was my first day there, and that wind obviously was very tough. But neither guy adjusted at all throughout the practice.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically, I think it was Keenum's airmail of Michael Floyd. Michael Floyd got a step on. I believe it was Sam Brown.
Yeah.
Had about 2 or 3 yards on him. And that ball was literally 20 yards past Floyd, like downwind. It was literally, I think it landed in the end zone, I believe, and he was, that wasn't even close. So neither guy was great, but I would give the edge to Keenum. I think in situational drills, I think Keenum was a little bit better.
Yeah.
And he was able to he understood, for example, in like 3rd and 6 and 3rd and medium situations, he was, throwing past the sticks and kind of giving plays a chance. So I'll give him the edge there, but it's not like it's just a wide gap, and it's not like it's, I'm hoping you could tell from my tone of voice here that I'm not very confident or, enthusiastic about picking Keenum here, but I just have to, because your boy was a little bit terrible those 3 days I watched. So
if you follow my Twitter feed, I was not very enthusiastic about Taylor Heineke's performance during my time.
You wanted to interview him, and then you saw him play a little bit, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not today. And then I was like, maybe I'll talk to him tomorrow. And then it was like, maybe not talk to him today either. Heineke was less than impressive. Let's put it that way. I will say that his technique is still fantastic. I still have absolutely no doubt about his footwork and his ability to put the ball where he wants it and that type of stuff. He looked very good in that regard. You can look back at that the play where Rodney Adams caught a quick slant from him during the night practice, and then Adams proceeded to run all the way down the field, which the crowd loved. He's a real showman, that Rodney Adams.
He is.
But that was on a blitz on the double A gap look. So good on Taylor Heineke for being able to figure out that blitz was coming, allow his guys to pick it up, and then get the ball to a guy that can, turn a not great situation, at least from a quarterback's perspective, into a potential big play. I think that Adams probably would have gotten tackled about 8 yards.
Oh yeah.
There, if
he would have. The safeties were in position. It's just he wanted to get some crowd.
He wanted to have some fun.
Approval,
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But my point being there is his ability to read situations, I still think is, it's starter quality in my opinion. Now his accuracy downfield, I think, is more what Drew was alluding to as being less than impressive. He struggled mightily during, in the wind especially, never really recovered during that practice, as Drew said. But on top of that, he wasn't accurate during the night scrimmage either. I think he missed Michael Floyd a couple times, who looked a little bit frustrated to be working with the second team and third team quarterbacks, because I think that Michael Floyd has sort of proved that he is a first team guy once again.
Which, you understand why he's not
right.
Getting a first team rep. That suspension, you can't put a guy in there if you're not going to use him the first 4 weeks. So it makes sense, but
it is still frustrating for a guy of kind of his pedigree to be in the situation he's in. But again, he put himself there. So I'm gonna give the edge to Heineke still. But I do think that early on in camp, I think at least I was talking about this, about how it looked like the training camp battle was already over. It's definitely not over. At least from what I've seen, Keenum was impressive. A lot more impressive than I gave him credit for, and I would think that over the course of the 4 days that Keenum did a little bit better situationally, like Drew said, especially in the end zone. After the defense knocked down 4 consecutive Sam Bradford passes in the 11-on-11 red zone drill during the night practice, Keenum came in and went 2 for 2, and then Heineke came in and also failed to get the ball into the end zone. So Keenum, to some degree, I think the experience is starting to show a little bit with him, but I'm not gonna waver on the potential of Heineke. It's definitely still there for him.
Yeah, I think so. The big takeaway for me, and I'm just maybe it's just optimistic or whatever, but I think just the big takeaway is Sam Bradford is legit, and his accuracy is just I seriously can't get over it. And I'm going to bring this up because it really did bug me a little bit today. That throw to Jarius Wright, it's getting a lot of attention on social media, and people are sharing it and everything. I saw one person today who will remain nameless, but this person responded to it and said something along the lines of, why are people not noticing that he would not have, Tom Johnson essentially sacked him on the play, but obviously during camp, you're not hitting the quarterback, so he was allowed to make the throw. But Tom Johnson made a great play on it, got around Nick Easton, and it probably would have been a sack. So he's basically saying, well, that does not, the throw doesn't matter. Why are we giving it so much attention? Because it would have been a sack. But here's the thing. That throw was elite. It had no room for error. He put it in the exact location about, 25 to 30 yards away. He had the sideline to deal with. He had Anthony Barr's 6'5" frame to deal with. Yep. He dropped it perfectly in the breadbasket.
Into a guy that stands at 5'11", by the way. There was no physical dominance that Jarius Wright showed on that play.
Yeah. Just appreciate an elite throw under difficult circumstances because, again, the sideline, Anthony Barr on the crosser.
There was another guy over the top, too. I believe it was
Mackenzie Alexander. Was it
Mackenzie
Alexander was in coverage. Yeah. I think it must have been a zone handoff where Barr ended up grabbing him and covering, which, again, that coverage was really good. But just appreciate the throw, appreciate the accuracy. And if Bradford throws like this, he was this good last year, too, as accuracy goes. But if he continues to be this good of a thrower, Vikings offense should be just fine.
All right, let's kind of move that away from the quarterback competition into the overall offense as a whole. Like I said, we'll continue this conversation on the next show as well. But I really want to talk about this idea of being more explosive because I think it's grabbed a lot of headlines. I know I've seen a couple of headlines from the Star Tribune. I believe 1500 did some work on it as well. I know Arif Hassan was talking a little bit about it on something that he did for zone coverage. So this has been a really big talking point on how the Vikings have certainly looked more explosive during camp. Obviously, we go back to the Stephon Diggs play at the night practice that everyone saw. But Sam Bradford's accuracy downfield, just overall, and he's talked a lot about being more explosive on offense while simultaneously checking the ball down, probably when he didn't need to. So, first things first, I think that this offense is going to be more explosive. I think there's really no doubt about that, simply because of the progression and just, Pat Shurmur has been...
last season, you can really only go up. That's kind of why I'm optimistic in that regard that it'll get better, is because you can't do much worse, or you really can't do worse than you did last year. So.
Right, I certainly agree with you on that. And then, obviously, just the fact that they have more explosive players now, right? We talked about the wide receiver depth chart for way too long on the show already, and obviously there's a reason for that because so many of those guys were very impressive, and even the guys that haven't been maybe as impressive as we've talked, as we hoped, for like Rodney Adams, for example, still extremely explosive players when they get the ball in their hands. Rodney Adams, for what it's worth, when the ball gets into his hands, he's dangerous as hell. And he's as dangerous as anyone on this depth chart, I should say, with the ball in his hands. Then you got Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, obviously, who are lights out when they get rolling. I think this offense is going to be more explosive, but I do want to temper the expectations a little bit because I think that Sam Bradford is still a little bit too tentative. And that's to be expected given that the offensive line, while it does overall look improved, it's not great by any means. Let's put it that way. So he's still a little tentative. He's still checking the ball down a little bit, and there's reason for concern for that reason. But Mike Zimmer has also been on him about this, about reading the defense and getting the most out of each play instead of just kind of checking down to a guy like Dalvin Cook, another guy who's very impressive that we haven't talked a whole lot about. But I do expect his offense to be more explosive. That's the simple point here.
Yeah, I think it's cautious optimism is the way to go here, I think, because there are reasons to doubt it.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's pretty much how I am, or aggressive pessimism, one or the other. But Sam Bradford, he'll always be, I think, that check. He'll check down if he can.
Yeah.
If he thinks it's the right thing to do, which obviously that's pretty vague. But what I'm saying here is, if he believes in his mind that a pass rusher is near him or he will get hit relatively soon, he's going to at least give his guy a chance to catch it and run for the first down instead of waiting for the guy 15, 18 yards downfield to open up, which is something I think Teddy Bridgewater does quite a bit, maybe almost to a fault, which led to some throwaways in 2015.
Yeah.
So, with this explosive plays thing, Adam West at a West E1 brought this up to us on Twitter, but it's more of a, I'll believe it when I see it type thing, especially with Pat Shurmur, because last year was dreadful as far as down the field.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, again, was hampered by the offensive line. But with an improved offensive line, and let's not forget Dalvin Cook. You mentioned him, but that guy can make explosive plays just by himself in the run game too.
And that he can also make explosive plays out of the checkdowns too, right? He can make those he can take those checkdowns or those bubble screens or those short passes that people give people criticize Sam Bradford with so often. He has that second gear that Adrian Peterson used to have. And I go back to this all the time. I don't know how this keeps continuing to come up, but Adrian Peterson's first touchdown was as a receiver on a check down type play, on a bubble screen type play thrown to the outside.
Like a swing pass, yeah.
So you can, if you have that second gear in the backfield with you, checking down isn't always the worst thing in the world. Because if you set up blockers, I mean, we know that our wide receivers can block. Credit to them in that regard. Michael Floyd, Laquan Treadwell absolutely can block the hell out of dudes. Stephon Diggs he blocks bigger than he is, I think, in my opinion. Adam Thielen, fundamentally sound as always. Caleb Jones, who actually looked pretty good when he's throwing his punches. I think he could square his shoulders a little bit more and set his base a little bit better. But just as a whole, the wide receiver group, they set up blocks downfield very well. So those check down throws, I mean, they're not explosive plays in, the premise of the concept that they're running. But Dalvin Cook can quickly turn those into explosive plays just by the type of player he is.
Yeah. So I think just by, like you said, the personnel, adding Dalvin Cook, hopefully getting Stephon Diggs for 16 games. Michael Floyd, another explosive possibility as a player. And then we'll see what happens with Bucky Hodges here. He's kind of a wild card, and if he actually does have a prominent role on offense, I'm not so sure about that yet. I'm not even sure he'll be on the roster, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think there are a lot of explosive possibilities. It's just putting it together and having Pat Shurmur almost integrate them, because it's not in his DNA to be an extremely explosive offense. So,
right.
there's optimism and pessimism with this one, but yeah.
But just as a whole, though, I think this offense is going to be considerably better than last year. And the biggest reason for that, we talked about on the last show, is simply the addition of the personnel that they've been able to bring in. I think the Vikings...
And a whole offseason, by the way, too, with Shurmur. That should... integrating actually your entire offense, maybe that's part of it. Maybe, mid-season last year, it's hard to integrate, all your explosive possibilities. Instead, you want to get the simple stuff down so you have an offense to operate on, So maybe that's part of it. We'll see.
Sometimes you just need to set the base before, really putting in the quote fun plays into the offense. And I think that Shurmur set a base that didn't lend reason for optimism last year. Part of that is because he became the offensive coordinator, week 5, week 6, and that's just not his fault at all. It's just it's a tough situation to be in. So he laid the groundwork for a lot of negativity surrounding this idea of a more explosive offense. But at the same time, I think that the Vikings are going to be a lot better offensively this year, and it's going to be a lot more exciting to watch. I think it's not going to be just the defense. And like you said on the last show, we went and did the research on this as well. Vikings can get 21 points. They're going to win 98% of games, or whatever that is. So I think they're going to be a lot closer to getting 21 points week in and week out here. The Saints have a lot to deal with, especially because I saw Marcus Lattimore is missing practice right now. So the Vikings are certainly coming. They're on the up and up. And with that, let's finish up this podcast with the questions that we have left on Twitter here that we haven't gotten to.
Yeah, let's see. We've talked about Adam West's question. We talked about Mike Krause's question. Eli left us a couple comments here, so we'll get to those. Let's see. He left us a take here. Let's assume Riley Reif and Rashad Hill are now back and healthy, which I think is expected for the season when the season begins. He expects Mike Remmers to then be benched by midseason. I guess I'll say this about Mike Remmers: pass protection. It's tough to evaluate it because he's going against Danielle Hunter all the time. But as a run blocker, rock solid.
Yep.
I thought, especially during the night practice, he was really good.
The Vikings definitely are getting their money's worth in that regard, for sure.
I'll give him that, and I think that for that reason, his spot is safe because I think the Vikings do want to get a ground game established. So,
yeah, no, that's I think the take is fair just because Remmers has been underwhelming, I guess. But the really important thing, and obviously the thing that the Vikings coaches are looking at, is the fact that he is such a great run blocker. He was moving Danielle Hunter around.
He was.
he has looked very, very, very consistent, very sturdy as a run blocker, and I really think that's going to kind of be the difference here in what makes him a starter versus sort of a swing tackle backup type player. I really think that's going to be the difference because he can set the tone as a run blocker for sure.
All right, and then his question here he gave us, it's kind of a two-parter, but who's going to make the roster that you didn't expect, as of now, I guess, who's on your 53-man roster that you didn't have before camp, and then vice versa, who was on your roster before you went and saw these guys, and now you would leave off. So I know one for me that is now kind of I expect to make the roster that I didn't initially is Shamar Stephen as a depth nose tackle. I was kind of skeptical about him. I think he's going to. I think he's had a really strong camp, and I think that backup nose tackle position is pretty good and set in stone for him. And I mentioned Bucky Hodges. I'm a little skeptical about his spot because when the Vikings were in the goal line jumbo sets, he was not on the field. It was Cal Carter instead as the third tight end, and then C.J. Ham was in the game at fullback. So that's very early. There's a lot of camp, a lot of preseason, etc. to go, but Bucky Hodges is a guy that I don't think his spot is locked in yet.
Okay, two guys that for me I thought were going to make the 53 that I'm kind of on the edge on now. First, Isaac Frichte, like Drew said, pretty underwhelming as a receiver, but I do think he was very impressive on special teams, so that might end up saving his spot. But I'm on the fence with him overall. And then Rodney Adams is the other one for me, just because he struggled so much catching punts, doesn't look as fluid. Stacey Coley seems to be light years ahead of him as an overall return man, and I just didn't see the route running improvement that I was hoping to see from Rodney Adams. So I think that he might be a practice squad guy, and I really thought that he was going to be on the roster for sure. So those are two guys that I'm kind of lower on after being down at camp. Guys that I'm higher on, Shamar Stephen for sure. I threw a lot of shade his way because of his lack of flexibility on the defensive line. But I think he has improved his technique a little bit as a 3-tech, and obviously he's big behind Linval Joseph. Who I guess we're gonna have to push that new contract conversation to the next show here. I meant to get to that, but anyways, Shamar Stephen, I'm with you on that, Drew. Jarius Wright is another one. I think Drew and I established early on in this show that we weren't super high on the idea of him being on the 53 this year, but he certainly established himself as a crafty vet, a guy that can lead this offense and be an instrumental part, just as a slot receiver. He really did did impress, and I think the fire that he's got in his belly because of people like us, because of people like Andy Carlson, it's firing him up, and now he's becoming kind of closer to a lock than I think a lot of
Twitter
us.
Tough guy. Tough guy, Andy Carlson. Yeah.
Twitter tough guy. Yes. So those are a couple of guys for sure. And then Caleb Jones, I'll finish up with him. I think that he has a really good chance to make this 53-man roster. Just as like a number 6 wide receiver, something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think our last one here is from @Skullstall. It's a kind of a quirky question, but he's kind of asking, what is the benefit of pairing Mike Zimmer's defense with Shermer's offense? How can they bounce off of each other and work together? Which I think I can say that I think what Shermer does there's not a lot of risk to it, and I think what the idea is to get kind of sustain drives and keep the defense rested, so that guys like Griffin, Hunter, Joseph, all these guys can make those splash plays and continue to be on the field and not need to take breathers. Then you bring in backup guys. So that's kind of what I get from that. But I don't know if you're looking at that a different way.
Not necessarily a different way, but maybe a little bit more specific. Number one reason why this combination of Zimmer's scheme and Shermer's scheme works so well, in my personal opinion, is because Shermer keeps that clock moving, right? And the number one thing that Mike Zimmer wants to do is manage the clock, manage his defense, like you said, keep them gassed up on the sideline, so to speak. But completing a lot of short passes and staying in bounds allows you to control the clock, allows you to really manage the game the way you want to do it, and then you send your defense out there, get a 3 and out, and you redo the same thing again. And like I said, if you score 21 points, which Shurmur's offense has, in the past when he was with Philadelphia or Cleveland or whoever you want to pick from, his offenses have been able to move the ball pretty consistently and been able to control the clock. So when you have this caliber of a defense running this complex of a scheme very efficiently, it allows you to manage the game very well. And for that reason, I think that they work in cahoots very well.
Yeah, I like that. I like your analysis a little bit better than mine, to be honest. But do you have, I guess, any final takes here from the show? I'm gonna wrap this up because I wanted to get to a couple of interviews that I was able to get, kind of explain or kind of go on with those. I thought they were pretty fun. So anything?
Yeah, obviously we're running out of time here, and part of the beauty of training camp is that it does give us so much to talk about that we are sort of forced.
Yeah. I think we can make this one the offense one because I think like a lot of it was offense, and then we can do defense next time.
So we'll talk a little bit more. Yeah, that sounds great to me. We'll talk a little bit more on defense. Talk a little bit more of the stuff that we were able to, the quote unique content that we were able to put together down in Mankato on the next show. That will be live on Tuesday night around 8:00, tentatively Central Time, as I said before. I guess the final takeaway since we're making this an offense show, wide receiver group, probably the most complete group up and down the board of any offensive group. So offensive linemen, quarterbacks, tight ends. Tight ends were actually pretty impressive overall as well. But wide receiver group, they're having a bunch of fun out there. Really talented group. A lot of different types of receivers up and down that lineup. And even with a guy like Laquan Treadwell on the sideline, I think that honestly, to some degree, it benefited the Vikings. As injuries aren't fun, but there is a benefit to having guys like Rashad Hill in there instead of Riley Reif because you know what you're getting from Riley Reif, and it's nice to see what Rashad Hill has been able to do. You can say the same thing about the wide receiver position. So my major takeaway here is that the wide receiver group is really starting to look dangerous. I think that this really could be an explosive group, and I think that you could see a 1,000-yard receiver emerge this year if they don't spread the ball around a whole lot and it becomes, more the Stephon Diggs show instead of the Diggs, Thielen, Floyd, Treadwell, Wright, Jones, Adams, Coley, etc. I do think that you might get your 1,000-yard receiver finally since 2009 with Sidney Rice, as I love to point out, as always.
Yeah, you always bring that up. I'm going to see, there were two guys that I interviewed at practice or at camp, and I interviewed them because they popped out to me when I was watching practices, and that was David Morgan was one. The guy was, the Vikings had him on the field for, I feel like every single snap in their red zone situational stuff. He was on the field for every single one.
He can block, my God. He can really
these
block.
Moving guys. Emmanuel Lemur is what, 6'4", 6'5", just a hulking linebacker size-wise. And it's effortless. Just moves him, shoves him 15, 20 feet out to the side.
He gets inside the pads so well. And you know what's the cliche that everyone talks about? Whoever gets lower is going to win that battle. Yeah. David Morgan sets the base and gets low and really strikes the pads inside outside the numbers as they teach it. The technique is just... It's unbelievable. It really is. He's just... It's every time, too. It's consistent. And as a receiver, by the way, underrated. So he caught that touchdown. He caught that touchdown in the red zone for Bradford.
He told me that the Vikings like to use two tight end sets, which is very not Shurmur-like. Yeah. So basically he's saying, I'm good enough that Pat Shurmur is changing his ways to more two tight end sets. So David Morgan and then C.J. Ham as a lead blocker. That guy hits people.
As a chip, as a guy that chips too, like coming out of the backfield as a chipper.
Oh yeah,
dude, I saw him lay someone that I can't remember who it was that he laid out, but he decked him. So.
Yeah, and I mean, he even admitted this to me too, that the technique isn't always there. That's a work in progress, and it understandably so as a guy transitioning from running back to fullback. But that guy is figuring it out quickly. He's a little bowling ball that nails you.
He kind of has some Mike Tolbert to his game. I think.
A little bit. I mean, Tolbert is
a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more of a bowling ball. but like that kind of that athletic, you said that you talked to him about how he likes to compare his game and watch the film of Greg Jones, who is like basically a borderline Hall of Fame caliber fullback that
Kennedy Palomalu coached Greg Jones and Fred Taylor and all those guys in Jacksonville back in the day, and that's where it sounds like that's where Ham is learning his technique and that developing in that way. So
it's a great comp for him, right? Because he does have that 4.6-ish speed.
Yeah, and Jones was a running back.
Right. So. He has that big body, that frame where he can really run into guys and create a nice collision. So C.J. Ham is a guy that I think you'll agree with me on this, that he's probably a bubble guy in the 53 simply because I don't think that the Vikings are going to keep a fullback at this point. I think they're more inclined to keep 4 running backs. And given how deep this running back depth chart is, Bishop Sankey, we haven't talked about him
by the way, really good in the night practice.
Looked really good in the night practice, like you said. But C.J. Ham, man. He could definitely play. He's going to be a practice squad guy for sure if he doesn't make the active roster as this quote the team's fullback. But you picked a couple of good interviews there because those guys are both a couple of characters. First of all, David Morgan with the hair, the head and shoulders like hair.
And C.J. Ham, by the way. So it was the walkthrough on Saturday. I waited specifically for him to talk to him. He was the last guy, and it was by an extra 5 minutes because he literally. I'm not kidding. Literally signed every single autograph that was offered to him and took every picture.
Good for him.
That's the kind of guy he is. That's the kind of guy he is.
That's going all the way, going kind of tying in the beginning of the show to the end like comedians do so well. Going back to what I was talking about, like trying to separate the emotions from being an objective journalist. When you talk to a guy like C.J. Ham, it's really hard to not root for that guy after talking to him. He's a bubble player. Objectively speaking, I think Drew and I will both tell you that he's not by no means a lock. Probably more of a practice squad player at this point in his career. But this is a guy that everyone in Vikings Nation should be rooting for because he is such a nice guy, because he is such a fun-loving guy, and because he does have such a great story. Coming from a D3 Augustana, it's great to see him even in the NFL in the first place. He's entering his second season in the NFL now. I'm definitely rooting for that guy for sure.
I think it's. I especially as a South Dakotan who went to college in South Dakota. He actually knows a couple of guys that I golf with kind of sometimes here at Prairie Winds Golf Club in Watertown, South Dakota. So some mutual connections, and I was able to talk to him about that a little bit. But I'm rooting for him, and I'm rooting for David Morgan, and I don't know. That was my final takeaway. That took us like an extra 8 minutes of the show. That's already lasting way too long. So
that's fine. I think we're gonna be able to keep this under 75 minutes if I talk really fast here and close this thing out. So thank you as always for listening to the About the Labor podcast. Thank you shout out to my guys AJ Marco and Alex Goebel. We saw those guys down at Johnny B. So it was a lot of fun to meet you guys. Always a huge fun experience for guys like me and Drew, who are basically nobodies, but when we get to meet guys that enjoy our product and get to talk to them about what we've been kind of working on for the last 4 or 5 years here, it's nice to see that you guys appreciate what we're doing here. So continue to listen to the About the Labor podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Vikings Territory, iHeartRadio. You guys.
Shout out to Eli for winning the shirt, by the way. Yeah. We had the contest. Eli, we did if you guys didn't see on Twitter, we released a video. We did the drawing out of the hat on Blakesley Stadium Field. Eli at School Seas was our winner. So congratulations to Eli, and he can, if he's listening to this still, he can DM us and for his shirt choice and size, and we'll get that to him.
Absolutely. And we'll have more contests in the future here. So keep listening to the About the Labor podcast. You can check us out at the places I just said. Make sure to check out my guy Brendan Gay at BrendanCom or the JokeJointComedyClub.com. His show is coming up here on August 10th. Should be a lot of fun, and I know he's down in Madison right now, so he's just finishing that up, and he'll be back in Minnesota soon, and we'll have the opportunity to check him out at the Comedy Club here in Lilydale, Minnesota. So make sure to get your tickets. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll be there. And like I said, continue listening. I'm glad you guys enjoyed the show, and we'll talk defense on the next podcast. Check you out on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. sharp. Thanks, guys.